It's strange how moments of clarity can sneak up on you, how something simple, like a photo frame on a shelf, can whisper truths louder than any argument ever could. Growing up, our family photo wall was Rachel's Hall of Fame. Her dance trophies, debate medals, and prom queen sash, all beautifully arranged. My science fair ribbons, tucked inside a drawer. My perfect report cards, lost in a stack of unopened mail. I never realized I was the invisible one until I watched how often the spotlight followed her. It didn't matter how hard I worked, how quietly I tried to earn recognition. Rachel's accomplishments were celebrated with banners and cake, mine with polite nods and the occasional, good job. I was 10 when I won the regional spelling bee. I came home, shyly smiling, clutching the gold medal. My mom barely looked up from cooking. Rachel got into that summer leadership camp, she said, stirring the pot. Isn't that amazing? In that moment, the medal felt like a paperweight. Our childhood wasn't cruel or loud. It was subtle. Rachel got the front seat on every road trip. I sat behind, knees jammed into the back of my mom's seat. She got the embroidered Christmas stockings. Mine was the generic red one with my name written in glitter glue. They're small things, almost laughable now, but they pile on each other, don't they? Until your place in the family feels firmly set, appreciated, but not adored. Seen, but rarely truly noticed. Rachel knew how to perform love. She was expressive, charming, always said the right thing when extended family visited. She'd call Mom every day just to check in, which of course turned into long chats filled with praise. Me? I kept our conversations short, efficient. I thought showing up meant paying the bills, not sweet talk. That was probably my biggest mistake, thinking love had to be proven, not proclaimed. And still, I adored her. Not blindly, but as a younger sister does, seeking cues, copying her hairstyle in middle school, borrowing her books in high school, even trying to like the music she played. Part of me truly believed that if I just kept being good, eventually they'd see me. Really see me. But Rachel wasn't malicious. She was just skilled. Skilled at molding herself into what they wanted. She knew when to laugh, when to cry, when to tell them just enough without giving away the struggle. Me? I was too honest. If things were tough, I said it. If I failed, I owned it. I wasn't polished. And I certainly wasn't patient when fairness was off the table. As we got older, the dynamic calcified. Rachel called Mom and vented about money struggles. She got a "don't worry, honey, we're here for you." At that same time, I was quietly wiring thousands into their account each month to keep the lights on. No fanfare, no acknowledgement. But I didn't want praise, I wanted peace. I told myself, it's not about them knowing. It's about doing the right thing. But I was wrong. Because love, without recognition, owns resentment. Doing all the giving without ever being named. The weight of that invisibility grows heavier with time. Until one day, someone shines a light on the wrong person, hands them credit for something that cost you sleep, security, and self-worth, and you finally say, no more. That's how the invisible one becomes unmissable. Not through rage, but through revelation. Through the strength to stand apart and finally be seen. I used to think that if I just worked hard enough, they'd finally see me. While Rachel basked in center stage, whether for her high school art awards or simple dinner conversations, I became excellent at fading into the background. Somewhere between missed birthdays and Megan can handle herself comments, I made a decision. If love couldn't be given freely, maybe it could be earned. So I chased excellence. College was my first breath of oxygen. I left Philadelphia in a whirlwind of scholarships, part-time jobs, and all-night study sessions. Every time I earned an A, I'd call home, hoping to hear even a trace of pride. Instead, Rachel would pick up. Mom's busy right now, I'll tell her. They never called back. Even then, I never stopped needing their approval. I just fooled myself into believing I didn't. I drowned that need in spreadsheets, market forecasts, and promotions. When I landed a full-time position at a top investment firm in Boston, my name went from invisible daughter to successful cousin in family gossip, but still never quite our Megan. But somehow, that didn't stop me from sending money. When Mom had her first surgery and Dad's hours were cut, I didn't hesitate. I called the mortgage company directly. I adjusted my budget, canceled my gym membership, and sent the first $4,000 anonymously. I remember choosing to stay unnamed, not out of modesty, but hope. Maybe if they didn't know it was me, they'd value the help more genuinely. Maybe they'd feel supported and cared for, even if they never thought to ask about me. Every month after that, I wired the same amount. For 3 years straight. Quietly. Consistently. And I watched as their lives remained stable, while mine stayed split between boardrooms by day and loneliness by night. Rachel, of course, seemed ever present, a beloved guest in their home, dropping in with baked goods or photos from her latest weekend getaway. She floated, while I held the foundation of the house beneath them. Still, part of me thought I was fine. I had my career, my independence. I left early for work and stayed late. I mentored junior analysts. And when promotions came my way, I declined a few. Maybe a part of me feared that climbing higher meant just drifting farther out of reach from the family I secretly wanted to be closer to. I told myself I didn't care. But every time I saw my sister's name glowing on my phone during a family Zoom call, every time Mom cooed about how thoughtful Rachel is, I felt it a tug. A bitter ache I could never seem to add me, even to myself. My silence was wrongly labeled strength, even by me. But it wasn't strength. It was survival. A high-functioning, meticulously ordered reaction to never feeling seen. And yet, with each dollar I sent, I imagined bridges being built. I imagined my mom holding a credit card statement and wondering, who helped us? I imagined that moment of discovery followed by a text, a whisper, or anything. Was it you? It never came. They told Rachel they were proud of her. They called her an angel. And she nodded. Of course, she nodded. So I stayed silent. Successful, but silent. But silence breeds cracks, and one day, the truth doesn't ask for permission. It erupts. It was a rainy Sunday evening when my parents invited both Rachel and me over for dinner. I hadn't been home in months, work, I'd said. But if I'm honest, I'd been emotionally circling the perimeter for far longer than that. The house looked the same. The porch swing still creaked in the same spot. Even the casserole Mom made was the same one she always prepared when Rachel was visiting, her favorite, not mine. The dinner was uneventful until my mom proudly raised her glass and said, to Rachel, for always looking out for us. That $4,000 every month you've saved us. We're so blessed. I blinked. $4,000 every single month. I just want to say how grateful we are. Mom continued, eyes watery, resting a gentle hand on Rachel's sleeve. Rachel smiled. Not the grateful kind. It was the curated, demure, false humility of someone who's rehearsed their acceptance speech hundreds of times. Of course, anything for family. My stomach twisted. I didn't speak at first. I couldn't. My voice folded in on itself as if emotion had vacuum sealed it shut. My hands, hiding under the table, clenched into fists. That money was mine. Those payments were mine. I'd set them up years ago, completely anonymous, not even using my primary checking account. I gave because I thought maybe, just maybe, it would bridge the aching gap they always pushed me across. And now my sister had wrapped that bridge in ribbons and claimed it as her own. I tried to break the silence. Actually, I think there's something I need to clear up. You don't need to make everything about you. Megan, Mom interrupted with a sigh that landed like a slap. Can't you just let your sister be appreciated for once? For once? Wasn't it always? Rachel didn't deny it. She didn't even glance at me. She went back to sipping her wine like none of it mattered. Like I didn't matter. My father chimed in, serious and expectant. Frankly, Megan, your sister has stepped up. Maybe it's time you considered contributing something. Even something modest. That was the moment. Not the lie. Not the theft. But the suggestion that I hadn't given anything. After all those nights I sat calculating budgets, sacrificing trips and luxuries just to take the financial worry off their plate. I excused myself shortly after, mumbling something about an early meeting. The second I got into my car, I sat in stunned silence. The windows fogged over while the rain patted against the roof in rhythmic disbelief. How long had Rachel been taking credit for my support? 2 years. More? And how little must my parents think of me that they never even questioned it? Truthfully, I wasn't just angry, I was heartbroken. But wrapped inside that pain was a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If no one was going to stand up for me, I would have to do it myself. This wasn't about revenge then. It was about finally drawing the line. That night, I logged into my bank account and ended the recurring transfer. $4,000. Gone. Just like that. And with it, so was my silence. I still remember the exact bite I had in my mouth when my mom said it. She took Rachel's hand and smiled, not at me, but at her. I don't know how we'd stay afloat without our sweetheart. Every month, $4,000? That's no small thing. I froze. The garlicky chicken, once comforting, turned to dust in my mouth. Rachel beamed. Practically blushed. I'm just doing what I can, she said softly, like some kind of saint. For a moment, I thought I misheard. Surely they didn't mean Rachel. Not the same Rachel who once borrowed $50 from me and never brought it up again. Not the Rachel who bounced jobs, dated rich men for sport, and called investing too much math. But then my dad chimed in. You could learn from your sister, Megan. She gives without turning it into some sort of performance. I felt the room tip slightly. Like standing on stage when someone pulls the curtain mid-scene. I hadn't told them about the money. I sent it anonymously every month, covered the mortgage, medical bills, even car repairs. Rachel didn't know all the details, but she'd guessed enough clearly to claim the credit. For 2 years, 36 months of sacrifice, late nights, skipped vacations, erased with one sentence and a smile. You're kidding, right? I blurted out before I could stop myself. She hasn't been sending the money. I have. The silence was immediate and heavy. Then my mom scoffed like I was telling a joke in poor taste. That's not funny, Megan. Rachel didn't blink. That's low, she said, shaking her head as though she were disappointed in me. My dad's voice was the final blow. Honestly, I didn't expect you to be jealous over this. Rachel's always done what she can. If you want to contribute, just say so. My stomach turned. I'd walked through fire for people who never brought me water. And now, the truth, my truth, slammed into a wall of disbelief and denial. I didn't speak for the rest of dinner. That night, I sat in my apartment and scrolled through old transfer receipts, email confirmations, and bank statements like I was cataloging someone else's life. 1,000, then 4, then another 5. Birthdays, doctor visits, property taxes. I replayed each sacrifice I'd made while keeping silent. The worst part, sent the money. It wasn't even Rachel's theft. It was that they believed her more comfortably than they could believe me. They didn't ask questions. They didn't doubt her. They preferred the narrative where Rachel was generous and I was selfish. Why? Because it made them feel right. It was easier to keep me cast in the role of the difficult daughter. That night, something in me cracked, not like a bone, but like a dam. Nothing gory, just quiet pressure releasing. For years, I'd told myself it was worth it. That maybe if I just gave a little more, they'd finally see me. But this wasn't a conflict. It was a revelation. I'd been invisible for decades. Now, I wasn't invisible. I was disposable. Forgotten when convenient, blamed whenever it helped preserve their fantasy. And I was done helping them write that story. They wanted to believe Rachel? Fine. But they were about to learn the cost of writing off the daughter who kept the roof over their head. Silence had covered for them too long. It was time I spoke in a language they understood. Proof. Data. And the unfamiliar tone of resolve. It was supposed to be just another family dinner. One more evening of plastered smiles and quiet endurance. I twisted my napkin under the table as my mother went on about Rachel's incredible devotion to the family. Her voice practically quivered with pride. Honestly, she said, nudging Rachel's arm and beaming, you've taken so much burden off our shoulders with those monthly contributions. We're blessed to have a daughter like you. Rachel lowered her eyes modestly, giving a small, rehearsed shrug. Well, it's nothing, really. Something in me fractured. I stared at her, heart pounding. For 2 whole years, I'd been sending those payments. $4,000, every month, quietly, steadily, anonymously. I had told myself it didn't matter if they knew, that helping them was enough. But it did matter. I straightened in my chair and cleared my throat. Actually, Mom, I've been sending the money, not Rachel. The table fell quiet. Only the clattering of cutlery from the kitchen and a ticking wall clock filled the space where someone might have asked a follow-up question. But instead, I watched as confusion flickered across my parents' faces, and then melted into irritation. "Oh, Megan," said my mother, sighing, "it's really not nice to take credit for something your sister's doing." My father shook his head. "You're rewarding yourself for mere participation. Rachel's been consistent, generous. Don't be envious. You could contribute too if you wanted to." It was like a trap door opened beneath me, and I dropped, no net, no parachute. I exhaled, slow and deliberate, locking eyes with my father. "I have been contributing," I said, voice low. "Every month. Since the beginning. Do you want proof?" He scoffed. "If that's true, then stop the payments. Let's see who steps up." My mouth parted slightly. Not from shock, but from something deeper. There it was. The switch, the invitation. He didn't realize what he'd given me in that moment. Permission to walk away. Not out of guilt or desperation to be seen, but from clarity. The next morning, I canceled the bank draft. I remember staring at the payment successfully stopped screen for what felt like minutes. My thumb hovered above the screenshot function. But I didn't need it. And then something in me clicked. I wasn't going to whimper out. No, I wanted truth. Needed it. So I pulled every financial record I had, statements, wire confirmations, emailed invoices. All of it. Stacked them neatly into a binder with color-coded tabs. I stared at the number. $162,000. Gone, with not even a thank you. Swallowed by someone else's lie. I gave Rachel 1 week. "Tell them," I texted, attaching a picture of the binder. "Or I will." She read it within seconds, but days passed with no reply. No confession, no apology. Just silence as though I wouldn't actually follow through. She didn't know me at all. My silence all those years had been mistaken for weakness. For acceptance. Now? I saw it clearly. It had been survival. But I wasn't surviving anymore. I was choosing myself. And sometimes that means choosing the moment to break. So that you can begin again, stronger. The payments stopped. But I didn't. Not anymore. By the time I walked out of that family meeting, the cold air outside felt warmer than what I'd just experienced inside. I'd always prided myself on professionalism, logic, and staying composed under pressure. But this wasn't a boardroom. This was decades of emotional erosion hitting me all at once. And still, somewhere beneath all that pain, a spark had caught fire. If rationality was the only language my family understood, then I was going to speak it fluently. That night, I sat at my desk, logged into my bank dashboards, and pulled up every transfer, every transaction, every receipt going back 3 years. The amount stunned even me. $161,200. Mortgage payments, surprise doctor bills, utilities. I had spreadsheeted their survival. And Rachel had accepted bouquets and verbal love notes for every cent. Every row, every dollar documented, not for vengeance, but for clarity. The truth deserved to be more than an emotional outburst over Sunday dinner. It deserved to be seen. So I compiled a binder, organized meticulously with highlighters, tabs, and cover letters. 4 copies. 1 for Rachel. 1 for each parent. 1 for me, to remember that choosing myself wouldn't be a moment of weakness, but a permanent act of strength. On Monday, I sent Rachel a simple message. "You have 7 days to tell them the truth or I will." No threats. No insults. Just a deadline. And then, silence. Not a single call. Not a word. Just like always. So I adjusted my strategy. While she played avoidance, I played offense. I booked therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez, a woman whose warmth and wisdom cut through my shields faster than I expected. Started to use my PTO, visited Chicago for a week-long job interview, and began picturing my life not around duties and obligations, but desires. What did Megan want for once? I wasn't angry. I was focused. There's a dangerous clarity that comes when you stop begging people to see your worth. Instead, you start showing it to yourself. Midweek, Stephanie came over with wine and a fire in her eyes. "I hope you're not giving in," she said, tossing her coat onto my couch. "Giving in?" I asked, flipping through my assembled binder. "You've supported them for years. They can survive a few weeks of reality." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it wasn't. "Do you know what their version of reality is?" I asked. "It's 5 seconds long and resets every time Rachel smiles." Steph just raised an eyebrow. "Then it's time the smile breaks." By Friday, nothing had changed on their end, but everything had on mine. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking from guilt dreams. I opened a new investment account. I called the condo agent I'd been ignoring. I stopped waiting on their love like it was an achievement to unlock. And then, right before the week was up, I scheduled the email. 4 PDFs attached. Evidence unfiltered. But fate rewrote the script. Hours before the email would deliver, a knock came at my door. My parents stood there, tired, confused, haunted. Rachel behind them, rigid and pale. As I welcomed them inside, folder in hand, there was no triumph in me. No victory, just intention. I wasn't trying to break them. I was inviting them into the truth. Whether they accepted it or not wasn't up to me anymore. But I was ready either way.dg day. I printed everything felt surreal. Bank transfer receipts, annotated statements, screenshots with time stamps. It was all there, lined up in black and white like chess pieces before a decisive checkmate. Each page told a story that for 3 years had gone untold. One in which love had looked like sacrifice, in silence, in service, and in return, I'd been erased. I'd always assumed that good intentions would shine through eventually. That if I just gave more, worked harder, stayed quieter, someone would finally notice. Someone would say, "You've done enough." But now, with each proof-filled sheet slipping into its neat plastic sleeve, I realized, nobody sees what you won't show. Stephanie came over as I sealed the folder. She didn't say much, just watched. She'd seen the decline in me long before I did. Watched me bending backwards every holiday, every phone call. Watched me light candles for people who never looked up from their feast. The folder clicked closed with finality, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel heavy, I felt ready. I gave Rachel a deadline. 1 week. 7 days to finally tell the truth herself. There was no threat in my voice, just a calm confidence that made her blink. I wasn't begging. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was just done. The week passed quietly. Too quietly. I wasn't really surprised. Some people only speak when the silence becomes deafening. So I scheduled the email. Set it to send Saturday at noon, when I knew they'd be home. Everything was in there, account histories, dates, amounts, notes to the utility companies, all laid out like a ledger of love uncredited. But Saturday morning, there was a knock. My parents stood at my door. I opened it with a steady inhale, unsure if Rachel had finally spoken. They looked uneasy, but not yet changed. That told me everything I needed to know. They'd come to ask for a little help. A small amount. Just a contribution. Even modestly, my mother said, soft-spoken but sharp-edged, as if I'd somehow failed them by keeping my wallet closed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just handed them the folder. They hesitated. My father adjusted his glasses. My mother froze mid-sentence. Slowly, carefully, they opened it and began to read. I had watched numbers my whole career, but watching their expressions shift, shock, confusion, then stark realization, was something no spreadsheet could quantify. That was when Rachel arrived. She must have heard, or maybe since Saturday wouldn't stay silent. She stepped into the room, pale, shaking, but still tried to play the part. Said it was a mistake. Claimed it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was more than paper. It was my life, and it spoke louder than she ever could. In the end, she broke. Blurted out her confession through hiccup sobs, eyes pleading. Our parents turned to her, stunned. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. "I'm not angry," I said softly, "but I'm done funding someone else's fiction. It's up to you now to support each other honestly." Those words landed heavier than any accusation. As they stood there, Unsure what to say, I turned to Rachel and said, "Then maybe now, it's time to become who they think you are." The email. I canceled it. Sometimes the truth doesn't come from burning bridges, it comes from simply turning on the light and letting people see. In black and white, I didn't expect them to come. Not really. Not after the years of silence swallowed, the praise misdirected, and the outright dismissal of my voice just days ago. But when the buzzer rang and I checked the intercom, there they stood. My parents, together, stooped a little more than I remembered, but eyes sharpened with something that looked like outrage. Or desperation. Maybe both. I let them in. Not out of obligation, but because I was ready. They hardly sat down before my mother asked, "Why would you lie like that, Megan?" Rachel wouldn't. She's not capable of going that far. I didn't answer immediately. I walked to the side table, took out the manila folder I had prepared through sleepless nights and simmering composure. I laid it gently on the coffee table like a final piece in a jigsaw puzzle they'd never cared to complete. Inside, 3 years' worth of bank receipts, direct transfers, handwritten budgets cross-referenced with dates on their mortgage ledger. $4,000. Every month. Signed from me, never once mentioned. Never once asked for acknowledgement. My father leaned forward, glasses slipping down his nose. His face slackened the longer he scanned each page. My mother, silent now, finally took a breath like she'd been underwater. "I didn't lie," I said softly. "I just stopped playing the part you assigned me." The room seemed too still. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, just tense, bracing for impact. The apartment door burst open then, and Rachel rushed in, breathless. Her eyes darted from the papers on the table to Dad's clenched hands, to my unreadable expression. Her voice cracked before anything coherent came out. "They weren't supposed to find out like this," she said, voice so low it almost didn't register. My mother's mouth parted slightly. "You knew?" Rachel sank onto the arm of the couch, her hands trembling. "At first, I thought it was just some help you didn't want credit for. But then they assumed it was me. And it felt nice. Just once. So I didn't correct them." My father leaned back. "Years, Rachel. We thanked you every month." "I know," she said, voice breaking. "And it was never mine to accept." I didn't gloat. I didn't cry. I simply stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city I fought to belong to. Behind me, the walls were finally cracking, but not from my doing. I only turned the light on. They all waited for something, maybe forgiveness, maybe permission to go back to pretending. Instead, I said, "I've stopped the payments. Going forward, you'll need to figure things out together, without me playing silent benefactor." My mother stood, shoulders shaking. "Megan, we didn't know." "If we had." "But you didn't ask," I interrupted. "For years, you didn't ask." Rachel stood too, tears smudging whatever makeup she had forced on before coming over. "I'm sorry, Meg. I don't deserve." I faced her directly for the first time that evening. "Then it's time to become who they think you are." The silence this time was different. Heavier, filled with consequences. They left quietly. I didn't watch them go. I closed the door gently behind them, locking it not just in wood and metal, but in meaning. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible, but I also wasn't angry. I was freed. There was a strange sort of calm that followed the storm. After the confrontation, after Rachel's tears, after the dawning silence that settled over my apartment once my parents left, something shifted in me. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even relief. Not yet. But for the first time in years, I could breathe without holding back a part of myself to protect others' feelings. Setting boundaries was supposed to feel cold. That's what I had feared. Years of familial conditioning made me believe that saying no meant rejection, that drawing lines meant cruelty. But as I finally stood up for myself, I realized boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. Doors you close and lock, yes, but ones you can also open when someone earns the right to step through. I didn't return their calls at first. Not out of spite, but out of care for myself. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, called it controlled extraction. I called it finally learning to choose me. It's a strange thing, stepping away from a story you've been cast into since childhood. I had always been the responsible one, the overlooked one, the spare shadow behind my sister's spotlight. But without that role to perform, I had to reintroduce myself to myself. So I started small. I lit a candle on my balcony like I always said I would, but never did. I stayed home some nights, not because I had to catch up on work, but because I wanted to. I cooked a recipe I loved without rushing or calculating macro splits. I sat with silence, not out of loneliness, but out of peace. Meanwhile, my family began their own reckoning. My parents wrote a letter, handwritten, surprisingly. Not a full apology. Not yet. But a beginning. We didn't know, it said. We should have listened. It was an opening, not absolution, just acknowledgement. And that mattered more than I expected. Rachel, on the other hand, took longer. She left voicemails, clumsy blends of anger, guilt, and something close to remorse. Eventually, she emailed me. She didn't ask for forgiveness, not directly, but she admitted the truth. I was afraid, she wrote. Afraid they'd love you more if they really knew who you'd become. I reread that line so many times I could hear it echo in my sleep. Months passed, my life expanded. I accepted the job offer in Chicago. Bought my condo, not for prestige, but because it had a kitchen nook with morning light and ivy on the fire escape. I dated someone who didn't flinch at silence and didn't expect me to shrink my ambition. And you know what? I visited my parents' new, smaller home. Not out of duty, but because I chose to. We awkwardly sat through dinner, no grand speeches, but real conversation. Rachel's therapy updates came through Mom now. Apparently, they go together. I didn't rush to join them. I was still building my own center, but I smiled knowing something shifted. I think that's what becoming whole means. Not fixing what broke, not pretending it never hurt, but standing in the fullness of your truth and inviting others to meet you there if they can. I no longer need their praise to believe in my worth. I live with clarity, not in the shadows. My revenge wasn't loud. It was composed, quiet, and earned. I didn't burn bridges. I only stopped carrying people across them who refused to walk. This version of me? She's not angry anymore. She's free. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I heard the lock click behind them. For the first time in years, maybe ever, my apartment was silent. Not the kind of silence that came from absence, but the kind that follows a storm, thick, charged, and oddly peaceful. I stood still in the living room, eyes locked on the evidence folder still sitting untouched on the coffee table. I never had to give it to them. Rachel came clean, eventually, but even that had felt like too little, too late. My parents, shaken and quiet, had left with more questions than answers. But I had never felt more certain. That morning, I thought vindication might finally look like love. That once they knew the truth, they'd embrace me the way I'd ached for all those years. But what I learned is that sometimes love, real love, means letting go of illusions and the people who can't see you beyond them. I walked to the balcony, the crisp edge of the Boston air brushing against my cheeks. The city moved below me, alive and indifferent. I could hear my voice, the voice I didn't use at our childhood dinner tables, the one I'd finally found at 28, saying calmly, "Yes, I stopped the payments. It's your turn, all of you, to figure this out on your own." Letting go of the role I'd played for decades, the responsible one, the quiet one, the provider, was terrifying. But I was done trying to earn love that should have been freely given. When Rachel cried in the hallway, begging me not to turn my back on them, I didn't feel triumphant or cruel. If anything, my heart cracked open. Not for her lies, but for the girl she still was, trying to be adored, no matter what parts of herself she had to distort to do it. "I can't keep pretending," I told her. "But you have a chance now to become the person they think you are. Take it." She didn't respond. Her face fell in a way that told me, maybe for the first time, the mirror had become unbearable to look into. In the weeks that followed, the silence with my parents was long. Then hesitant emails came. Short, unsure messages from my mother. A forwarded article about family therapy from my dad. Rachel's name rarely came up, but the tone finally shifted from defensive to reflective. I didn't rush to reply. Instead, I poured into myself. I scheduled long overdue trips. I closed on a condo with a walk-in closet and south-facing windows, something I had always imagined gifting my parents. This time, I gave it to me. I accepted the promotion I once declined out of guilt. And I didn't hide. I didn't minimize myself to be digestible. I didn't stay quiet so others could feel more comfortable in their version of reality. When I finally did visit home, months later, things were not perfect. They were slow, deliberate. My parents were awkward but trying. Rachel was quieter but sincere. And I was no longer shrinking. Sometimes, love isn't a dramatic reunion or a teary apology. Sometimes, it's simply the space to breathe on your own terms. Love can look like walking away from roles that no longer serve you. Love can look like truth, even when it unravels everything. There's pain in letting go, but more often than not, peace follows. And on that balcony, the night everything changed, I realized, Ed, I loved them enough to walk away. And finally, I loved myself enough not to look back.